Ruby Moon is by a Melbourne writer called Matt Cameron. Essentially, it's kind of like a fractured fairy tale. It sits in a sort of weird genre. It's a little bit absurdist. It's contemporary Australian writing, and well, the things that I reckon it's about is how we deal with grief. That's kind of at the heart of the play. So you meet these characters, Ray and Sylvie, and you see them deal with the loss of their 6-year-old daughter Ruby.
It's like the fairy tale. It's that age-old cautionary tale almost for children, but it's also got a very modern Australian edge to it, I think, which is quite.
Yes, it's sort of like a warning or a fable or a. Yeah.
They've been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, but it's sort of like a new retelling of it.
Usually when I read a play as a director, there's a single image that stands out to me and it's very clear in my head. It's either the beginning image or the middle or end, or just somewhere in the play there's a very clear singular image that becomes a sort of larger metaphor for the play. When I read Ruby Moon, it was actually quite frightening because it didn't arrive to me in such a simple image. It arrived to me in a series of kind of disjointed, fractured, twisted sort of images. And in the text there's, an ice cream van that's singing Green Sleeves off in the distance, and an upturned ice cream cone on a steaming bitumen, or a rocking horse that's moving with no one on it. When thinking about how you go about staging something like this, for me it was really important that whatever set we created felt like a canvas, in that on that canvas all of those singular images could resonate and have meaning. It's sort of that rule when you have sort of absurdist work or really strange work. The minute you put on stage a really weird set, you've completely blown away.
It loses all the effect, really.
You've done the job of the play in the set. The set's there to kind of support the storytelling. One of the things about this play that's so hard with the design is that it's got to be Ray and Sylvie's house, but it's got to be Dulcie Doyley's house, it's got to be Sid Craven's house, it's got to be Sonny Jim's house. It's got to be everything. And then at the end, obviously, that moment with the realisation that in fact they haven't left anywhere, it has to be the one space. So I guess it has to be their space, it has to be all the other spaces, but it has to be their space. It kind of does your head in a little bit. It's sort of like tumbling down a rabbit hole.
And we wanted, actually, one of the things we quite liked was the sense of a room within a room within a room, which you kind of you get that a little bit once you're in the theatre.
And one of the things that we spoke about was that idea of a picture book. So when you look at a pop-up book, you've got the cover and then you open it and then you've got the pop-up section of the book and then you've got in there the text. And what we liked was that kind of repeated image.
And it's very voyeuristic, I think, because we have a curtain across the front as well that opens to start the play, and you really get a sense that you're looking into Ray and Sylvie's world.
One of the big design references was Grey Gardens.
It's great.
Which is a documentary about a couple, basically, a few members of this family who've ended up living in their house, and as it sort of slowly degrades around them.
It's falling apart. There used to be society, socialites in America, and now they've literally, this mum and her daughter have been living in this house, and it's falling apart around their ears, but they're still living. They've created this sort of fantastic world in their head that they're...
And their own reality.
Yeah, their own reality, and it's sort of beautiful, but it's a bit sad at the same time. And we felt that it's very similar to what Sylvie and Ray had done.
When Pip and I started thinking about the costumes, there's obvious things that kind of spring up in terms of practicalities and what you need to make this play work. First up, there are heaps of costume changes, so you have to be practical about what you can do in the time that you've got, how much you can ask your actors to do. They can't be running around the whole time, frantically changing. So essentially what you need is kind of a base costume, which is the costume of Ray and Sylvie, and then it's just about adding on things on top.
Taking things away.
They talk about when Ruby goes missing. The night she goes missing, it's really hot. But when the play starts, you get that a lot of time has passed and it's raining outside, and so we really like this idea of it. And when you're kind of miserable and depressed and all you want to do is just put on heaps and heaps and heaps of clothes and jumpers and...
Build a physical wall.
Literally,
you and the outside world.
Swathe yourself in clothes and cotton wool. And so we talked about a lot of layers and socks and just so you can get this idea that they're sort of...
insulating themselves.
Yeah. So it's this,
from
once
reality.
again, this idea of this repeated image, which comes back to a lot of the sort of meta-theatrical conventions and ideas in the play when Matt was first writing it, this idea of performance and how we deal with life through performance, essentially. I hope when an audience comes and sees this, they are reminded of the power of storytelling through the medium of theatre. I think this particular story and this particular way of telling the story would not work if it was a film. It doesn't work if it's just in a book.
Yeah.
everything about this play is theatrical, and it reminds us that it's an incredibly powerful way of communicating.